right, today get excited because we are going to be trying out some different watercolor techniques using salt, alcohol, our brush, doing wet and wet. All of these really cool things make very interesting textures and colors in watercolor. Like if you want to paint fur, this dry brush technique comes in really handy. Snowflakes, salt, very handy. And this is called glazing. This is where you take one watercolor over the other one. Wet and wet is just a really cool effect, and this is just rubbing alcohol dipped into it. So this is really, really fun, and you can do a lot of different things with this after. Grab all the supplies that are listed in the document for this lesson, and let's get started. All right, we're ready to begin. Make sure you have your watercolor paper, and if you're right-handed, set your supplies up on the right side. If you're left-handed, go ahead and set up your supplies on the left side. So you want to have your watercolor paper, a watercolor set, paintbrush, and actually I kind of like to have it like this. A paintbrush, and I'm using this flat brush, a paper towel, water, some rubbing alcohol, some salt, and then some tape. And we're going to use the tape to separate our paper into 8 different sections, and you could just draw 8 different sections. You don't have to use the tape if you don't want to, or if you don't have it, then that's totally fine. So grab your tape and go ahead and tape. I like to tape around the edges first, and then separate your paper into 8 different spots, and they don't have to be perfectly square. Remember, you could also do it like just 2 here, 2 here. So then you have 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom. All right, the first thing we're going to do is make a flat wash, and we'll just do it in this square right here. So flat wash means it's just one color, it's not getting lighter or darker. And in order to do that, we need to make a puddle. So drop some water into your tray or onto a plate if you don't have one of these, and then go ahead and grab some color and drop it in. You could also grab 2 colors. This doesn't have to just be one. Like if you really like a jade color, you could add some green to your blue. It doesn't have to just be blue. So you want a puddle that's big enough to cover the area that you're trying to cover. And I'm going to paint this one in, so it looks like I probably have enough. I don't think I'd have enough to paint this one in. It's pretty big. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Pick up your paint and your brush, and then we're just going to layer it going down. So this, it actually helps a lot if you kind of tilt your paper up, but since I'm on a flat table, this should be fine. And you want to just overlap that line before just barely. And that's not a very flat wash, but it should blend and get a little bit better. All right, now we're going to do another flat wash in this square. I'm just going to add a little bit more green. And this is going to be for a technique that we'll use later. All right, now we're going to paint this square in, and we're going to need a little bit more paint. So I'm going to mix up a bigger puddle in this part of my tray, and I'm going to add maybe purple to it, or violet, whatever you want to call that color. And I might add a little blue. Just make sure your puddle's pretty big so that we can cover this whole space, and we'll probably use it somewhere else. I'm going to add a little bit of blue. Why not? Okay, once you get the color you want to make sure your salt's ready, because we're going to paint a wash on it, and then we're going to sprinkle some salt in our wash. And what's going to happen? It's so cool. You'll have to just wait and see, and I won't ruin the surprise. So grab your paint, soak it up on your brush, and let's go ahead and paint this area in. So I'm just overlapping my lines just barely. And then I'm going to grab a pinch of my salt and just sprinkle it on there. And then just leave it to do its thing. All right, now in this area right here, we're going to create something that is called a gradated wash. You can use whatever color you want. If you want to use this green color again, or even mix up another color. Remember, you can always pause these videos if you need more time, or like if you want to mix up a color, or you want to go back because something didn't really make sense. Just pause this video and go back. So make sure you have the color on your brush, and this is where we're going to go from dark to light. So we're going to start at the top and paint just a few lines, Then we're gonna dip our brush in our water, and I'm just kind of rinsing it off just a little bit, and we're overlapping that line. And then we're going to just keep overlapping it while we're adding water and kind of blotting our brush off. So we just slowly add water and get rid of the color as we do this. Uh-oh, a piece of salt. Well, we'll have to see what happens. Okay, this next one is pretty cool. So what we're going to be doing is, this is called wet and wet. So we're gonna paint this with water. So I'm just painting it with water, no color yet. And then you can grab some color on your paintbrush and you can drop it in there. Whatever colors you want. You could use the same color. You just have to do it while it's still wet. If it's dry, this won't work. If it's wet, it really works well and it looks pretty cool. Again, remember, if it doesn't work, it's just probably not wet enough. Okay, now let's try to use the rubbing alcohol. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to paint a color down, and then I'm actually going to dip the backside of my brush into the alcohol and drop it into that color. So what color should we use? I'm gonna add a little bit more green to this puddle and just use that color. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I have my paint on there, and now I'm just grabbing this rubbing alcohol, I'm dipping my brush in it, and I'm touching the paint. So what this does is it pushes the paint around. The paint kind of resists the rubbing alcohol and moves away from it. So I don't know, I think of this as just like a really fun way to create texture in your paintings. Okay, so that is rubbing alcohol, and that one is just so cool. I think it does such a good job. For this technique, we're going to be doing something called dry brush. And so that's where you have paint on your brush, but it's dry. And a lot of you are really good at this. I've seen your paintings, and it kind of like looks scratchy. So you want to get some paint on your brush, not too much water, maybe blot it off, and you want to smash it. Kind of smash it out so that it looks like kind of like grass. And then you're just going to paint it in. So do you see, it gives the texture fur or grass. I use this texture on petals, all sorts of things. You could add like another layer over the top that just looks a little bit darker. So that's called dry brush, and it's really great for texture. But if you want something smooth, this one's not a great flat wash, but if you want something more flat like this, you want to just make sure you have enough paint on your paintbrush. Okay, you can kind of see the salt is already starting to make these cool crystals. Okay, the last thing I forgot that we were going to be using is a toothpick or a skewer or something that has kind of a pointy edge. So be careful when you're using this. And what you're going to do before we paint in this square is you could write something, you could create some kind of texture with it. If you're like me, I just broke it. But it has to push into the watercolor paper. So I'm just going to create some swirls, kind of some scrumbling in here, like water waves. You just have to press hard enough that it's going to push into your paper, but not scratch your paper. So you have to have something with an edge. You can use push pins, but they are a little bit more dangerous. So I probably would just use a toothpick. And then grab your paint color, whichever color you would like, and just see what happens when you paint that. So anywhere you scratch the paper is going to absorb the water and the paint a little bit more, and so it's going to look scratchy. Okay, now the last technique I'm going to show you is called glazing. And in order to glaze over paint, we actually need to make sure it's completely dry. So if I want to glaze a color over the top of this, I have to make sure it's completely dry. Which it is, because it's not shiny down here. I'm not going to paint up here because it's not dry. And you grab your color, and then you just glaze over the top of it. So we could create maybe just like a diagonal here. and that's called a glaze. It's like layering watercolor, and it's a really cool way to get some effects. Also, if you glaze over dry watercolor, it'll also just make it look darker, even if it's the exact same color, which is a great trick. There's a lot of other techniques, so you can use a straw, drop a puddle down, and then blow it into branches. You know, I'm just gonna show you that in here. Why not? We have a tiny bit of time, and this is one of my favorite things. So I'm just gonna show you. Let's see, let's just add it like a blue kind of brown tree. You just wanna get some paint and you're gonna drop it into a puddle. So you have to have enough that it's going to make a puddle. So just kind of drop some in there. So you've got a puddle, maybe add a little bit more paint to it. Grab your straw and then just kind of aim it where you want it to go. But if you want to add branches, you can just grab that paint, kind of, oops, I've got a little water in there, drop it, you know, where you want that branch to come off, and then you could add it, right? Or it looks a little bit like bird legs right now, but if I wanted to add one coming off of that side, well, I couldn't. It's a little bit harder to control, but it is really fun. So that's using a straw. Sgraffito is this one, and it does work better if you use a pin. So once it's dry, you want to take the tape off carefully so you don't rip your paper. I am taking mine off a little bit earlier just so I can kind of show you how. Now if it starts to rip, like mine did a little bit, you can just start from the other side. You want to take the tape off in the order that you put it on. So you can see it is tearing mine a little bit, but it's not too bad. So just try to look for those layers that are on very top, and then you can take your tape off. And what I would do after you take your tape off is label these so you can remember how you did it for your reference. Like if you want to do some more watercolor paintings and you're like, what was that technique? How did I create that grass? Well, if you write dry brush under it, you'll just remember you used less water. If it starts to lift off your paper, just start from the other side. No problem. Some tape sticks worse than others, but I think it's worth the risk. Okay, so just take your tape off. And if you want to, you can label these different sections. So we have a flat wash, a glaze, salt, a straw, dry brush. This is Sgraffito. It didn't work as well, but you can still kind of see some texture in there. Rubbing alcohol, and then this is wet in wet. Oh, and this also is a gradated wash going from dark to light. I hope you enjoyed painting with me and you learned some different ways to use watercolor, how to make different textures and add different effects. Now what I want you to do, one thing that I forgot when we were painting together, you need to brush the salt off of it. So just go ahead and brush the salt off after it's dry, and then you'll see these really cool little crystals underneath. It almost looks like snowflakes. This is a great texture, and it's just really fun to do. There's also a lot more techniques you could find to do with watercolor. Now what I want you to do is choose 2 or 3 of these different techniques and create your own painting with them. Whatever you want. It could be a landscape, it could be imaginary, it could just be squares with different colors in them. Anything you want, and try to use 2 to 3 different techniques that you liked. And I hope you have a lot of fun. Have a great day.